Hey everybody, Crow back again, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Data East Collection 1 for the Evercade. If you're wondering what the Evercade is, it's this handheld device right here, takes cartridges. If you want to know more about it, check out, there's a link in the description to the video where I picked up this thing and had my initial impressions of it. But in this video, I just want to focus on the 10 games here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about them for a little bit, and then I'm going to give them a rating or a rank or whatever, anything from 1 through 5. These rankings are specifically for the games on the Evercade. I know these are ports of NES, Genesis, and Super Nintendo games, but instead of ranking them as if I was playing them on those consoles, I want to rank them as if I'm playing them on the Evercade, which means, you know, games that have two-player ability, they kind of lose out on that since this Evercade is a single-player device. Back to the rankings. A 5 is a great game, one that I think is fantastic to play on the Evercade. 4 is something I consider to be a good game, something that I really enjoy playing, but maybe could use some improvements here or there. 3 is what I consider to be an okay game, something that doesn't really sway me in the good or great category, but also something I don't really think is a bad game. Just okay, maybe I'll play it here and there. 2 is what I consider to be a poor game, something that I don't really like, but maybe something that I find value in going back and retrying and playing again. And a 1 is just something I'd consider a bad game, something I just don't want to touch again on the Evercade. And of course, these rankings are just my own personal opinions. Nostalgia is a factor. It's a big time factor for me. And I'm not really trying to take into consideration what the general public feels about these games. This is just my own opinion. So let's get started with the first game on Data East Collection 1. Alright, first up is Bad Dudes. This is a game where you are sent in to rescue the president. You're just this big muscle guy and you're walking and beating up all the ninjas in your way. I think the original name of this game was Bad Dudes versus Dragon Ninja or something like that. Now, this is a port of the arcade game, and a lot of people, including myself, will say that, yes, the arcade version is vastly superior to the NES version, which was released in 1989. I've never really been a huge Bad Dudes fan, but when I was sitting down and playing this, given the fact that the Evercade gives you turbo buttons with the NES games, you just hit the buttons above it and you got turbo fire, I found this game to be immensely entertaining. I would just be walking and punching just super fast. I actually made it quite farther in the game than I normally would have, and I kept going back for more. On top of that, while I was playing, I learned that if you hold down the punch button, you could let go and unleash a super powerful punch. I mean, it's more powerful, it sometimes can help you, but actually, to be honest, I'd rather just do the rapid fire. This is like a great game you could use save states on that are built into the Evercade, and I just had a ball playing it. And this is a game that before playing it, I thought I was either going to give it 2 or a 3, but I found this so entertaining, I'm just going to have to give this one a 4. I think this is a really good game to be playing on the Evercade. Game 2 is Burnin Rubber. This is the 8-bit NES version, which was released in 1988. This game might better be known as Bump and Jump. This is one of many ports from an arcade version. In this game, you're driving your car, and in order to pass by all the vehicles on the road, you can either try and bump them to crash them off the road, or jump and land on them to also destroy them. But they also can bump into you, and if you hit the side of the road, you'll explode. But there are also obstacles and large gaps of land that you'll have to jump as well in order to make it to the end of each level. And the ultimate goal here is to rescue your kidnapped girlfriend, as it typically was in games of the era. Now, this is a game I just keep going back and playing again and again and again. I think I like every single version of Bump and Jump there is. And I was looking for a reason not to give this the highest score possible. But the truth of the matter is I just like this game a lot, and pretty much every port that I've played of this game, I've always gotten so much entertainment out of this game that I didn't want to give it a 5, but I guess I have to give it a 5. Next up, we have BurgerTime, released on the NES in 1985. Now, BurgerTime is one of my favorite arcade games of all time. It may very well be my favorite arcade game. And the NES version of BurgerTime, as many people already know, is not the greatest port of the game. Now, before I continue on with the NES version, BurgerTime is a game where you play as Peter Pepper, who navigates a maze while I guess he's avoiding mutated eggs and hot dogs and pickles or whatnot, all while making these super big hamburgers by walking across them. Now, the thing I really like about BurgerTime is the element where you can either walk across the patty and it drops to the next level, which in turn drops that piece to the next level, and so on. It's the chain reaction mechanic of the game. And if your enemies get caught under those burger parts, they get squished. But even better, if they're on top of the burger when it drops, then that piece will drop even more levels than it would have normally. And so it's just fun to see how many enemies you can get on top of a burger to drop it. The problem I have with the NES version of BurgerTime is that the enemies, the monsters, the hot dogs, the pickles, the eggs, they move way too fast in the NES version of this game. So you really can't use the same techniques in the arcade version that you can in the NES version, because the monsters are just moving way faster than I think they're supposed to. So that being said, what am I going to rate this version of BurgerTime? I kind of wanted to give it a 2 or a 3, and I know a lot of people feel that way about the game. But to be honest, I was sitting there playing this on the Evercade, and I just had to make adjustments to adjust for the speed of the creatures. And yes, this is not a really great arcade port of an arcade game that I like, but I still like this version of the game, oddly enough. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 4. Game 4 is 2 Crude Dudes, also known as Crude Buster. This is the 16-bit Genesis version from 1991, and this could almost be considered to be like a follow-up of Bad Dudes. The plot is very similar. The only difference is that in 2 Crude Dudes, this is a post-apocalyptic world where the government is sending 2 buff, crazy dudes out to fight thugs in order to, I guess, regain territory or something in this game. But this game is way more entertaining than Bad Dudes. This has your crazy and wild looking guys walking around. They can punch and kick down walls, but they can also pick up stuff, including other enemies, and toss them around the screen. Yeah, this game is just a blast to play, bar none. I had a great time with this one. And in between stages, you punch a cola machine in order to pick up the cans to replenish your life. Yeah, I played this one quite a bit. This is another great game to use with the Evercade's save states. So I'm definitely giving this one a 5. It's a no-brainer. I almost want to go out and find the Genesis cart itself and to add that to my collection as well. I just love this game. Game 5 is Fighter's History. This is the 16-bit Super Nintendo version, released in 1994. And at first glance, you would say, hey, this is just a Street Fighter knockoff. And you know what? You'd be right. This is so much of a Street Fighter knockoff that Data East was actually sued by Capcom when they released this in the arcades. But the result is that Data East did win that lawsuit, and thus we get this Super Nintendo port. So is this worth playing over Street Fighter? Not really, but the game is competent in being a fighting game for the era. In fact, without really knowing anything about the game, I picked a character, tried out some Street Fighter moves, and voila, found out all the special moves for the character. But the game is solid enough. It does even throw in an added mechanic of each character having a weak spot. And if you attack that weak spot enough, they will get dizzy and your attacks will do more damage, and you could possibly just KO them right there. I didn't really get that into the game. That's just what I read about the game. So, you know what? This is solid enough. Unfortunately, this being the Evercade, you can't really play against another person, so you're kind of regulated to playing against the CPU. But yeah, I had some fun playing this. I found this to be better than okay, so I'm going to give this one a 4.
Ow, come on! Matlock, win!
Game 6 is Joe and Mac 2. This is a 16-bit Super Nintendo title from 1994. It is the sequel to the arcade game Joe and Mac, or otherwise known as Caveman Ninja. But the difference between the first game and the second is that this game was released solely with consoles in mind, and therefore they've kind of expanded a little bit. This is a platformer where you play as a caveman who runs around, beats up other cavemen and other dinosaurs in a quest to retrieve an item that was stolen from your village. You could get power-ups, and I think in the sequel here you get a bit more power-ups to work with. But also, whereas in the first game it was just go by level, they put a little bit of an RPG element in this sequel where you could decide what level you want to go to. Sometimes you can even go into stores and purchase life ups and other things. Nothing too crazy though. And as such, this is just a fantastic game to be playing on the Evercade. You could really get into this. It gives you a lot more abilities to work with. Yeah, this is clearly superior to the original. This is just a solid game all the way around. I've got to give this one a 5. Game 7 is Karate Champ. This is the 8-bit NES version released in 1986. This is a port of an arcade game that used 2 joysticks to help you perform your karate moves. It was 2 joysticks per player. Now, the NES, that simply won't work, so the control scheme was converted to a D-pad and buttons. And I'll be honest with you, I find this game incredibly frustrating to play. I could never get a handle on this game at all. I can never figure out what moves I'm doing. It's the kind of game where you need to know what button combinations do what move and where you're sitting at and how the player is going to react and where you're going to kick. And for the longest time I was sitting there playing this game and I always get my ass kicked by the computer player. And forget about playing 2 players because this is the Evercade and you're stuck with the single player. But even in the arcade version, I could never get a handle on this game. Now, I was playing this for quite some time and I kind of figured out simpler is better in this game. And I actually made it quite a few levels into the game just by simply punching at the right time and just slightly adjusting if that punch didn't connect correctly, and I was able to fly through many levels that way. But after each of those levels you get a bonus stage where you have to hit these vases that are thrown at you, and I could never hit them because I can't learn what button combinations will make my character kick which way. It's not intuitive at all, at least it's not for me. So I just find this game frustrating, and I wouldn't call it a bad game. I know there's plenty of people out there that do like the arcade version. I'm not really sure how the NES version stacks up against the arcade version because I find both to be frustrating. So I gotta give this one a 2. I mean, it may actually not be poor, but I'm poor at it, and because of that, I really don't like it. Game 8 is a Magical Drop 2. This is a 16-bit title released on the Super Nintendo in 1986. And when I say Super Nintendo, I actually mean Super Famicom, because as far as I can tell, this game was only released in Japan. And the interesting thing is that they must have used a translated version for this compilation because everything's in English, but I think the original on the Super Famicom was only Japanese. So that's quite a bonus. But this is a puzzle game where the balls are coming down from the top and you would move your character, grab the balls, and shoot them back up in the air. And if you match 3 in a row vertically, all those balls and any ones that happen to be touching of the same color will disappear. And there's plenty of power-ups that are scattered in there. And there's a few game modes to play. There's the endless mode, which is just play until you die. There's a 2-player mode that you cannot play because you can't play with 2 players. And then there's a story mode, which is, I guess, like the 2-player version, but you're playing against the computer. And there's another mode. It's kind of like, I think it was called the Oh No mode, but it's really just a puzzle mode where you have to complete the levels in a certain amount of turns or something like that. So there's plenty of variety here. The game itself is really fun, and I find it to be more fun than I thought it was gonna be. So I'm gonna give this one a 5. I'll definitely be back to play this one. Game 9 is Midnight Resistance. This is a 16-bit Genesis title from 1991 and is a port of an arcade version. Now this looks very similar to Contra, but the difference between this and Contra is that in the arcade version of this game, there was a little dial, I think, on the joystick that allowed you to point your weapon in any direction while you were running. Well, obviously you don't have that in this Genesis version, so they kind of altered it so you can hold down one of the buttons so you can continually fire in one direction while moving in any direction you want. And that makes this game really cool, but what makes this game even cooler is the fact that you can pick up these keys that all the enemies drop, and in between stages you kind of visit this armory where you can unlock other weapons to use based on how many keys you have for those weapons. And that kind of adds in this replayability element where you're like, well, which weapon do I go for? And you try one, it's like, well, maybe this one isn't the best for this area. Let me try another weapon. Personally, I love the flamethrower, but also the 3-way shot is very good as well. I mean, I really had a ball playing this game. Yeah, the way this game plays is really cool, and I'm giving this one a 5 for sure. It's a no-brainer because I'm definitely going to be back to play this one again, and probably again, and probably again. The 10th and final game in this collection is Side Pocket, and this is the 16-bit Super Nintendo version released in 1993. Side Pocket was an arcade game that was ported to a ton of systems, and the version you're getting here is kind of an enhanced version of the arcade game. Now, there are a couple of 2-player modes that you can't play, but the single player options are really fun. There's the normal arcade game where you have so many shots to sink all the balls, and if you do things like hit the balls in consecutive order or even just consecutively, you get bonus points, and you have to meet a certain target score in order to move on to the next stage. And then there's also a trick shot section that just, you know, I really never really got into, but I just love the main game because after you do move on to the next stage, you can also perform a trick shot for even more points to try and put you over the edge. But overall, I kind of see this game as a calm, relaxing puzzle type game, and it's just the kind of game you go to when you don't want to play something too action-packed. You just want to sit back, kick back, relax. Perfect game for that, and this is one I'll definitely be back for. So this is another game I'm going to give a 5 to. And those are our 10 games for the Data East Collection 1. Now, 9 out of 10 of these games I gave 4 or 5s. In fact, 6 of the games I gave 5s. And that just seems a little bit insane. I mean, I didn't want to be, just giving them really great scores, but I had a ball with all these games. And in general, I really do like Data East games. In fact, the one game I really didn't like on this collection is Karate Champ, and I could still see myself going back there to try it every now and again. Maybe I just feel maybe there's just something I don't understand about it. But as it is, I've never really been a big fan of the game, neither the arcade version or any of the home ports. Now, what I like to do is just to get an average of the scores that I've given the games in these collections. For example, with the Atari Collection 1, I can't remember, there were like 20 games, and that wound up with an average of 3 point something, I can't even remember. But for Data East Collection 1 here, if we average all the scores together, I'm gonna wind up giving this whole collection an average score of 4.4, which is really fantastic. I mean, really great that 9 out of the 10 games I find good or better on this. So, that's really all I got to say about this. The next collection I'll wind up looking at will be Interplay Collection number 1, that also came with my premium bundle Evercade, as did this one. I don't even think I mentioned that. Oops. Until just now. But but that's it. I'm going to end the video right here. See you next time. Bye.